a beautiful blue and gold morning here after so long, after
Thank
having.
you.
Oh, here we are in Bhubaneswar. Wonderful. My dream
Thank,
place.
thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from Kalinga Literary Festival, Bhava Samvad. I am Kamalakant Das from Kalinga Literary Festival team, welcoming you to another fascinating session on the current crisis of COVID. KLF Bhavachambat was designed, were conceptualized in the month of March and April and launched in month of May to reach out to people as the term suggests Bhava Sambad, Bhava. So the feelings and emotions of one person remains within one person makes little sense. It's to reach to all others. So in the sharing and caring and compassion, keeping that as a basic foundation of dialogue, we created this platform. Thanks to Rashminanjan Parida, thanks to Sitansu, thanks to Prachi Madam, all of them who have brought this platform to create um, uh, 1 million imprints in last just few weeks. So we are inching towards, we have crossed already 50 episodes. We're inching towards 100. We're looking at by December, we'll reach there as well. So thank you, viewers, for your continuous support. And today we have a fascinating panel led by both authors and led by another fascinating individual who will take this discussion forward. So I will read a little bit about a very brief introduction about them, and I will hand it over to Ajay ji, the moderator. So surgeons Ishrat Sayed and Kalpana Swaminathan write together as Kalpish Ratna. They believe science has its true place in the humanities and in the understanding of the body as the essence of creative expression. Their special interest is the emergence of disease and its relation to the environment. In the secret life of Zika virus, they explore the long entanglement between man and virus. Their newest nonfiction book is Fat, the Body, Food, and Obesity. Their recent book is Synapse, is a collection of short stories. But today we'll be discussing about the book which is very, very relevant, Crown of Thorns, the Coronavirus and Us. Thank you, both Shrit Syed and Kalpana Swaminathan ji, joining us today and bringing new insights, because as the book reads, I have read a few pages of the book, very fascinating. The book reads why on COVID. There is so much material available. Why this book? That is where we need people like you, Ishrat sir and Kalpana madam, bringing your expertise and giving us new insights. So the next 1 hour or so journey will be taken forward by another fascinating writer and independent journalist who is based in Mumbai, Ajay Kamlakaran. He is the author of 3 books about Russia. His articles, columns, and features have been published by Russia Beyond, Open, Manorama Online, and several other Indian and international publications. Now we are into a fascinating session of learning what is there in the book and how the life is going to be and how the life has been. And what is the dil ki baat kya hai yahan pe hum wo bhi baat karenge. Thank you. Over to Ajay Kamlakaran, and over to you for the next 1 hour.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor Das. And good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to have this discussion. Now, I've been reading Kalpish Ratna's books for over 10 years. It started with the quarantine papers that looked at the bubonic plague in Bombay in 1896. They've also written another book about the plague called Room 000. And like Professor Das mentioned about the secret life of the Zika virus. And I'm a huge fan, as a Bombayite, and 3 of us are Bombayites, I'm a huge fan of their book, Uncertain Life and Sure Death, which talks about all sorts of illnesses in Bombay. So, Kalpish Ratna, Dr. Kalpana Swaminathan and Dr. Ishrat Syed have been researching and writing about viruses and epidemics for the last 20 years. And their books really made science more interesting, especially for many of us who never paid attention in science class in school. So I read this wonderful book about the coronavirus, Crown of Thorns, this week, and I was absolutely hooked. I read it from cover to cover. And I would like to ask you a few questions, starting off with, what is this virus all about?
Is that for me or Ishrat? Okay.
It's so easy. Go ahead.
Why don't you start?
I was saying it is. He's just put it in 3 words, and like, what is this virus all about? Yes.
Well, this virus, which everybody knows, is called coronavirus. In India, it's usually called corona, but never karuna, which is what it should be, because it is a virus that challenges the karuna in us. But what is a virus? A virus is just a speck of either RNA or DNA. That's all there is to it, with a blob of something else. But this virus, this SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes the illness we know as COVID-19, has challenged us over the last 9 months with a series of manifestations which we never expected. It started as something else, and it's growing into something else. And it is, for all of humanity, proving to be a crown of thorns.
And how we wear this crown of thorns determines where we will go with it and where it will take us. And to understand the virus, we have to understand disease. What is disease? Usually the word we use very thoughtlessly because of the meaning it has had for centuries, right? Any illness we perceive as, or we call as disease. Let's look closer at the word, and something unexpected is revealed. Kalpana, you want to take it from there?
Yes, because I want to talk a little bit about this word itself, disease. Now, the disease and the virus are 2 entirely different things. So let's get to the virus before we get to the disease. And let's get back to Ajay's question of what is this virus and what is this coronavirus? Isha, tell me or tell them whether this coronavirus is really something new.
Something new? Not at all. Not at all. In fact, why? One second. Let me. We have I mean, we think that this is something new, but latest genomic studies show that this probably has been with us for between 40 to 70 years.
That apart, Isha, that apart. Coronaviruses, as such, we have known for much longer as not causing. Yes. And the commonest coronavirus we know is the one that causes a common cold.
Common cold.
Right, but viruses cause common colds. But look at where we are at this stage now. In January 2019, when we first heard about COVID-19, it wasn't. I think it had just gotten that name by that time. And where we are right now, what is happening to us?
But just recent in this particular century, this particular virus and the disease which we now call COVID-19 should not have come to us as a surprise. In 2003, we had the outbreak of SARS, all right, and then in 2012 we had the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS. So it was just a matter of time before another coronavirus would come on the scene and make its play. Why were we so unprepared?
Well, if you ask why we were so unprepared, we should be asking that question about every outbreak of illness that comes about. Most illnesses today, after the antibiotic era is over, most illnesses which are communicable illnesses, which are infectious, which are infectious and which are contagious and which you can contract and which spread. I'm using all these different words to make it evident.
To run the gamut of how they are perceived. And
exactly. As compared with those illnesses that are present in equal dimension, but do not spread from person to person. So we're talking about communicable diseases here. And the most common communicable diseases today, we know, are what we call zoonosis.
We can list them as a litany, yellow fever, Zika fever, dengue, chikungunya, Ebola, SARS, Nipah virus, Rocky Mountain.
They go on and on. And
so when we had the outbreak of, can I interrupt you for a second? When we had the outbreak of MERS and of SARS, the world didn't just get turned upside down like this. Is this more dangerous than those viruses?
That's a $1 million question. That is Ajay. Ishrat, will you take the first lead in this, and then I'll follow.
Ajay, every disease is dangerous. Every disease is dangerous. Whether it depends on where you stand vis-a-vis that particular disease. Just now, for this entire year, pandemic has become a very popular word, right? Otherwise, it was just this kind of science fiction scenario in a movie, and we wrote about this, that a disease can become a pandemic where it can engulf all of us, but no one paid heed, rather, because everyone was busy with their own lives, and a small eruption here or there did not matter to individuals, right?
And also, I think that human memory is
very short.
Surprisingly, pathogenically short. It's really crazy how little we remember of yesterday. Now, 1918 is not that far back in time to remember the influenza pandemic, which killed many more people in more horrible ways than most things we have ever known.
Oh.
We forgot that. Today's figures for COVID-19 read 32, I've just got this off the net just now, 32.03 million cases, and this is the cumulative, and almost 1 million deaths. Now, I feel that these statistics are terribly, horribly misleading. They're misleading not because they're untrue, they are true. But in a way, they're not true too, because large figures and large numbers are perceived differently from the anecdotal next person who is sick. And the purpose of our book is to change your focus from that 32 million
from the statistics to yourself. Because
yes.
How do we deal with a problem? We deal with it at an individual level, right? Numbers can be confusing, numbers can be frightening, but numbers do not translate into you, me, and Kalpana right here. For us now, it is a one-on-one, right? The word pandemic is routed about, but in the 1990s, an anthropologist, Merrill Singer, he had coined the term syndemic. And basically what he was doing was, in his syndemic approach, he was saying he was linked biological and social interactions for prognosis of disease and health policy. And this particular moment in time with COVID-19, it is a perfect case of a syndemic happening and engulfing us, because it is an infectious disease. It is an infectious disease which affects the rest of the system, but how it affects our body entirely depends on the non-communicable diseases that are endemic inside us and in our populations. We all live in a state of chronicity, of chronic illnesses.
Ishrat, you can't be heard too well. I can't hear you too well. There's a little boom in that, and some of your words are getting lost. You're saying something very important right now.
I have my mic on.
Right. I've been able to hear
Ajay,
you clearly. Kalpana.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you absolutely clearly.
Oh,
If you're so the rest of you can hear, because what he's saying is something very vital. I didn't want to lose.
Sure. So this 40 to 70 years that you just mentioned a couple of minutes back about the fact that this virus could have existed, is that the explanation that maybe 40 years ago the average health of a person was much better than it is right now, so it's affecting us more, or are there other factors?
I would like to answer that so that you can join later and bolster me up a little bit with more fact. Ajay, from the what shall I say? From the commonplace statement that of state of health which you use, yes, definitely. 40 years ago, the state of health of the human population was better. How was it better? Today, 1 in 3 people are obese. 1 in 7 people are diabetic. Cardiovascular illnesses are killing people terribly all over the world. Okay, these are non-communicable diseases. Deaths from air pollution exceed all this. So now, Isha.
No, just to clarify his point, let me give him some numbers, right? Because
that's why I asked you.
So the last details that we have of global mortality, of the 56 million deaths in 2017, 73.4% were from non-communicable diseases. That means you can't catch it from me and I can't catch it from you. And the 3 leading causes of these deaths were cardiovascular diseases, cancers, and diabetes. Among the 21% who died of communicable diseases, that means infectious diseases that can be transmitted from person to person, a very large percentage who died were dying of lower respiratory tract infections. And in 2016, 1.9 billion adults were overweight. Overweight. And of these, 650 million were obese.
And why? Let me add to that, Ishrat, immediately to set at least part of the audience a little clearer in the last figures you mentioned. In India and in relation to Asian populations who exist anywhere, the figures which determine obesity and overweight are different compared to that for Western populations. So, for an Indian, for instance, BMI of 23 and above is considered obese, whereas you would say 25 and above is considered overweight for a Western. This is simply because genetically we respond with a greater impact on the cardiovascular system than does the Western. However, Ishrat, to come back to what you were saying, before you got to the figures, can you just go back and talk a little bit more about what you just started saying when I interrupted saying I couldn't hear you, between the infectious illness, COVID-19, and the non-infectious communicable illness, and then the syndemic that you're talking about?
Yes, so basically the total, what our current state is, that we live lives in a state of illness. A lot of people have diabetes, obesity, hypertension, chronic respiratory diseases like COPD from smoking or from air quality. Air quality we will come to specifically because air quality, the air quality index all across the world is specifically relevant to this particular illness, COVID-19, the disease that we know as COVID-19.
Ishrat, here, I would like to just break into what you're saying to challenge anyone who is listening with this little question. Supposing you got a grit in your eye, as just now as you're sitting, just imagine how uncomfortable it would make you feel. You wouldn't be able to watch, right? You'd be squeezing your eyes, you'd be in misery. And there's just a particle of dust in your eyelid. Now, while Ishrat goes back, I want you to imagine what such a particle of dust can do to a far more delicate tissue inside you, which is your lung. Now air quality index.
Yes. So in India itself, in 2017, 1.24 million deaths were attributed to air pollution, including 0.67 million to particulate air pollution and 0.48 million to household air pollution. All over India, the air quality index is dangerously high, and particulate matter is one of the most dangerous. That means
I think that does answer your question, no? Are we
right, it
healthier
definitely
now?
answers my question. And I didn't want to play spoiler because I did read in your book in detail about how the air quality in Wuhan, for example, when the lockdowns took place, changed. And say that is,
Sorry.
yeah, sorry.
This motorbike, yeah.
Okay. No, so do you think it's a good idea? So for people who live in rural communities, they would be less at risk because their air is much cleaner. That's
Where is it?
is it cleaner?
that's the assumption that we have anyway.
The rural community is now the focus of the industrialist interest.
Right.
So you have mountains which are broken, you have streams which are dammed, you have fields which are covered with pesticide. Spray, 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 dust, dust, dust. So,
Okay, so the more we destroy the environment, the greater we're at the risk of COVID itself.
Of anything, Ajay, of anything. See, it's a very simple thing. Take a household situation. Supposing you have 4 people who want to sit down to lunch at a table. But one of these 4 people has been doing his homework on that table. Right? Now,
Right.
you insist it's time for lunch, and the kid insists it's time for his homework. And the table now has got to accommodate his homework and your lunch. So now somebody's got to make the decision. What gets swept off the table? This is your planet.
Right, and the only place we can live on at the moment
is the dining table.
And
the homework table.
the only place, yeah. And we are looking more and more like Martians, and we are dying. But what I'm saying is that when your body is in a state of chronic inflammation from whatever the cause may be, a virus there are viruses everywhere, right? So even if a virus enters your body, enters your, say, respiratory tract, like this RNA virus, supposing it enters, your body's immune system and your body may be able to fend away if it was in a state of perfect health. But if you aren't in a state of perfect health, or if your health is compromised from some underlying factor, then this lodges in and it gets an invite. It sits in. It puts a cushion and just makes space for itself.
Comfortable and gets cozies up to you and causes a disease.
And
which brings me back to what Ishrat was saying a little earlier about disease. And Ishrat, would you like to talk about that a little bit, or shall I? The fact
and what happens is that once it settles in, you perceive it now as a disease.
Well, let me take that a little further.
Story, or is it the end of the story?
No, let's get into the story. Neither the beginning of the story or the end of the story. Let's get into the story. Now, you remarked, Ishrat, a little while ago that viruses are everywhere. And this could very well be the reason why everybody is now testing positive at the rate of 40,000 positive cases, depending on how frequent your testing is, because it shows up the fact that more and more people are testing positive. This doesn't mean necessarily that all of them are ill. And that's what our book wants you to appreciate. That here is the coronavirus and here is COVID-19. It doesn't make an equation till a third element comes in, and that third element is you. The virus has to enter your body. Your body has to respond to it and decide whether the end of the story which you should just spoke about, is either disease or good health. And it's how your body responds to it that makes all the difference in COVID-19. So, COVID-19 is not about the coronavirus, it's about us. And that's the only thing we want you to look at.
And we mentioned SARS, we mentioned MERS, okay?
Right.
In both those infections, they led to respiratory illnesses. And the end result, when the infections were very, very bad, was something which is called ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome. Now, that is the end result of could be the end result of almost any illness that lodges in your lungs.
Absolutely.
And be the factor that terminates your life.
So this point, Ishrat, which you're making, saying that ARDS, or what the public perceives as the need for to go on a respirator, the falling pulse oximeter reading, the fact that you are going to get breathless and ultimately die.
And also ARDS is not caused by the virus.
No, just a moment. So exactly, because it's not caused by the virus, it's like saying that when you die, your heart stops beating. It's almost as non-specific as that, because it's the end result of any number of illnesses which may begin or not begin in the lung. So the point what we want you to appreciate is that COVID is a lot more than that ARDS. A lot of people who suffer from COVID-19 bitterly may never get ARDS. A lot of people who even die from COVID-19 may not die of ARDS. So though it started in Wuhan as a respiratory illness, today COVID-19 is no longer a purely respiratory illness. You have people who die from heart problems. We have people who have central nervous system problems. We have people who have gastrointestinal problems. We have people who go into kidney failure, and all because of COVID-19. So why should that happen?
These conditions worse.
Sorry?
It makes these conditions worse.
No, it also makes those conditions worse, but you may not have any of these conditions at all. It will directly cause these conditions.
So
and
that means we really should be worried then.
And of course we should be worried, but our response to this worry should be measured and rational.
And also rational enough to know that every day your body is dealing with millions of viruses and bacteria, much worse than SARS-CoV-2, which are walking in and out of your body, and your body is dealing with them all. So why shouldn't it deal with this one too? You are as vulnerable to other illnesses as you are to this.
Illnesses have not disappeared. You think people are not dying of other illnesses? All other illnesses have taken a vacation.
It seems so. When you read from the media, it seems that nobody is.
There is nothing else which plagues humanity.
Yes. Suddenly we have been rushed into a state of excellent health, whereas
except for
COVID-19. Not rational.
Right. See, this book focuses so much on the individual response, how COVID affects the individual. As individuals, what can we do to stay safe and to keep our health? I mean, now that we understand what this evil, I shouldn't call it an evil virus, but what it can do, what can we do as individuals?
We can do quite a lot. Beginning as individuals within your home, and also
within yourself.
Yes, within yourself and within your home to begin with. First yourself, then your family, then your community, and then governmental policy. Let's take it in that.
And if we have taken care of ourselves and our immediate surroundings, that is our family, and each family has done this, the location, the society as a whole has taken a step in a particular direction.
Yes, so, it adds, it moves up, and you don't realize how quickly it can add up. You just have to tell a child to know how a message can spread. Social media is nothing compared to the amount of what shall I say, the virality of spread on a playground between children. They understand and they will transmit information and not viruses. So let's look at that chain. Let me start.
Okay.
Now, the three things that we need to do at any level, any of these three levels, so you can translate it on. There are just three things you need to do. The first thing is you need to breathe clean air. Within the house, this translates as no smoking, no dhua, no agarbatti, no home improvement, drilling, polishing, stone work, all that. Nako. Okay, so that's out. So the first, breathe clean air, you can take it to the next level of community and push it further. The second is check out in your family who has any of these illnesses: obesity or overweight, hypertension,
Any existing condition,
diabetes, any existing condition, as you corrected me rightly, any illness. You have any illness, don't be satisfied saying, wo to chalta hai. Go to your doctor, get advised, start getting
treatment. He should.
Yes, and start getting treated for it. Don't just look at it.
Treating these underlying conditions first. So say if you're obese, you contact your doctor and say, okay, I need it, and I need to work on this.
Speak to your doctor. Your doctor will know what to do for you. You don't have to tell your doctor what to do. Okay. We are trained, right?
Basically,
right.
It is to make you closer to a state of optimal health.
Yes, that's perfectly put. That's the job. And the third thing, which may seem very strange to you, but which can really be done at a very individual level, is don't disturb your habitat. If there's a tree outside, don't go cut it down.
And these see the diseases that these new diseases, they seem to come from nowhere. Or where do they come from? It is not that they are not there. They are all there everywhere around us. It is that we are displacing the causative organisms from their habitat where they have lived in harmony in nature. We encroach on them. If we encroach on the wild encroaches on us.
Absolutely.
It may seem very far for you to think that, bats in China had the virus. No, bats in here also they have.
That's not everywhere.
Every morning if you walk out, you'll find badam, jamun, all those fruit fallen on the ground here. And who do you think has been eating during the night?
Of course, our friends the bats.
Yes. So these beautiful creatures
they are the largest species of mammals which are extant on the planet.
Yes, there aren't more mammals than bats.
Yeah, exactly. Put
so
together,
we have so many species of bats all over the world. And being nocturnal and also having very secretive habitats, they're not easily seen. I mean, there are very few people who...
And when we see them, we have kind of, turned them into, for whatever reason, let's not go into the Dracula. We've turned them into this thing of comics and Marvel Universe and DC Comics, we go in that direction for entertainment. But
and it is so
allowing them to entertain themselves.
That we've given it such a horrid personality in these myths. A bat is a beautiful mammal. And also
you clearly mentioned that bats have, they're very important for our environment and for our ecosystem. You've mentioned that as well.
Yes.
But how do we isolate? What do we do? Do we just understand that one particular area is a habitat of bats and that area should not be touched? How does that work?
You could do that. You could do that to begin with. Now, that is a very common, that's very easy to do in places which have visible bat habitats, like caves, for instance. Now, the place where I live, I'm surrounded by caves, and all the caves are full of bats, okay? Fruit trees, forests, these are all full of bats. Railway stations. I wonder if there's any railway station in India which you can't enter at midday, and look up at the rafters. You'll find either langurs, pigeons, bats, and they are everywhere. So then there are some places you can't avoid, like the railway station. So what happens there is the bat-human interface becomes far more intimate. And if you kick them out of their trees, they're going to come and roost in your railway station, maybe even in your house.
Oh, that would be something.
And for
saliva that's dangerous.
Sorry,
It's the saliva of the bat that is dangerous, isn't it?
Sorry, could you say that again? You were breaking.
Saliva. It's the saliva of the bats that poses a particular danger.
Saliva, excrement,
any shedding from the bat, whether it's the saliva, whether it's the urine, whether it's
it will
the
come up its fur also.
fur also, that will also contain viruses. Now, viruses live within the bats as their habitat. They have made an evolutionary bargain with them that we will live with you, you will live with us. Okay, so the bat remains alive in a state of maybe chronic illness or whatever, but alive, because if the bat dies, the virus has to find some other place to live.
Right.
But when we displace bats from their habitat, what happens is that now this virus this virus has to find another place, because the bat has to find a place.
Yeah, another host who will give it
another host.
comfortable right.
Time, it will jump into something else, and that becomes the intermediate host, which over here just now for us is probably the pangolin in the transmission of this particular virus from the bats into human beings. So that is the intermediate host.
Okay. And how much do factors like weather play a role in the spread of COVID? Because now they're talking about a second wave in Europe, and they say that initially it was believed that warmer weather would be some sort of a filter for this, but that hasn't proved to be the case, because in May in India, we have temperatures of well above 45 degrees in the northern plains.
Well, such a what shall I say, such a linear relationship between daily temperature and the explosion of viral diseases is a little naive.
No,
that is not what we are thinking of when we talk about temperature. We're talking about far more important things. Like, Ishrat, why don't you tell them a little about, sea temperatures and global warming and how it
it is very, 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 very strange. The last month, I think it was the 23rd of August. It was a very strange landmark day, because it was exactly 164 years to that day when, in 1846, perhaps the first climate scientists of this age that we call modern age, a woman called Eunice Newton Foote, she read a paper at a meeting for the advancement of sciences, as it was called at that time, whenever people got together. And in her paper, her paper said circumstances affecting the heat of the sun's rays. What this lady had done was, she had checked out what different gases do to air and to the environment. And she had come to the conclusion that if you increase the amount of carbon dioxide in air, it raises the temperature of not just the air, but everything around it. So we have known that carbon dioxide is the driver of global warming for 164 years. This is 1846, 10 years, 11 years before our first war of independence. Okay, it was before steamships, before railways, before industrialization in its which led to this society and this world that we live in. That too was in its infancy. So we have known all this time that raising carbon dioxide in our atmosphere is going to cause some trouble. But what did we do? We didn't listen to it. We kept causing it. We have come now to a point where we have a doomsday clock has begun. We have, I think, about 8 years to set ourselves right before we reach the point of no return.
Well,
That is really scary.
Ishrat, this scary thing that you sprang on us just now, I want to add a scarier footnote to it, because
Scarier.
scarier footnote to it, because global warming, of which you know so much more than I do, Ishrat, so I kept quiet all this while, also changes the rate of reproduction of or recombination or mutation of viruses within the host. So, not that we have any facts to give you straight off, but this is something all virologists and all climate scientists are looking at. What is the relationship between global warming and the emergence of disease? When you look at the number of diseases that have emerged in the last 20 years, which are all killer diseases. Yes, Ajay, you're right when you said we were healthier before. So, ho kya raha hai?
Question here from Arun G. Why is this? These insights are not shared. At least I didn't read widely.
Can I answer, Arun Ji? That's why we wrote this book. So please read it.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
also there is but it's on a more serious ground. I think your question is very relevant, because compartmentalization of information has become so horrible today that we need to share. I need to know what entomologists think. I need to know what botanists think. If I am going to treat a patient, not if I'm a virologist.
Ajay, the thinking, like everyone is a super specialist in a smaller and smaller field of expertise. So if you go to an ENT surgeon, for him your ear, nose, and throat exist without your head, body, lungs, kidneys, etc.
That's a perfect illustration of what I was trying
to say. If you go to an orthopedic person, only your bones exist for him. If you are living in America, and if you are a dentist, every wisdom tooth is made for you to remove in the name of orthodontia. If you lived in Bombay in the 50s and 60s, all tonsils were made for one particular person, one particular surgeon to remove, and those tonsils have all led up to one of the largest construction businesses in India.
Oh, we know that. We know that. And then, of course, all the appendices which were removed go with the same counting. So medicine also.
Appendix was made only for the general surgeons to remove.
Yes. But you see, the answer to that is, forget about medical practice. The answer to that is actually to be found on the street. As we discovered when we were writing a previous book on Zika virus, this one, in case you want to know this one. This one. So at that time, this was a discovery which was very strange. When we walked out onto the street and spoke to people, just randomly we picked people. They were all people who were shopkeepers, school children, rickshawalas, sweepers, and I told them about Zika virus. One of the most important insights into Zika virus came to me from a woman who was cleaning a dump. So she has no education, but she is remarkably intelligent, as most human beings are. The moment, all they lack is the information. The moment you give a person information, he or she knows how to act on it. You don't have to talk down to them and say, do this, do that. They're smart enough to do, because it is their life.
Absolutely.
What do we do with questions on the screen? Do we take them later or do we answer now? Because I saw one.
And before that, Ajay, let me just make this point that we should not think of COVID-19 as a killer disease, but we should look at it as an infection that our body can resist. So if we start to get fit to counter it, it will not affect us so badly. If older people, because age has wreaked damage on the body, they have been suffering the worst from it. But if in an aging body, there are no contributing factors, if their lungs are in good shape, right? If they are not suffering from obesity, if they do not have hypertension, or even if they have hypertension, it is under control, then this virus is not going to push them over the edge. What this virus basically doing now is that it is hijacking us from our own defenses and pushing us over the edge.
I think, Ajay, I want to add to what Ishrat said because it's absolutely so important. It's the most important thing that we can understand now. The point that he made just now, that you may be old, you may be obese, you may be hypertensive, but it's not necessary you're going to die. You go to attend to the age you can't do anything about, but you can be fit and old. And there are, Ishrat and I are both in our 60s. And we are not. We don't look at ourselves as potential fall down and be dead just now. So what I mean is, you can address what you've got immediately. You can't say, "Oh, God is going to come and get me because I am obese, diabetes, hypertensive." That's plain stupid. Look at these things. Address them. The moment you start addressing them, your body moves from a state of chronic inflammation into one which is redressing it. So you're already changing the scenario from a dire scenario to a moderate scenario, which is what you should do.
And there is another word which we should tell people about, and because it is there written about a lot without actual understanding of what it is, and the word is spillover.
Right.
About spillover. Yeah. Okay. Now,
okay, go ahead.
Okay. Now, we talked about 5 minutes ago that the coronavirus circulates in bats. And as Richard told you, for millions of years, the bat has made a deal with the virus. And fine. So the virus lives happily in the bat. The bat is not sick. The bat lives in his tree. We live here. We don't get the virus. Everybody lives happily ever after. But there are situations when what is called a spillover occurs. Now, a spillover occurs when the population of viruses within, say, we're talking bats, we're talking corona, so let's restrict ourselves to that. When the population of viruses within bats, within a colony, is at a natural peak. This peak may be quite natural. It may be following the reproductive cycles of the bat. It may be following the point where lots of bats congregate. So the numbers of bats are more. Okay? That is one factor. Then the human...
They are a very social species.
Yes, bats are a very social species. They like to hang out, literally, no pun intended. They like to hang out with their old friends, and they keep coming back to the same roost. Same roost, same perch, same tree, or cave, or even rafter. Okay? So they're there. And then the human presence. Now, you have, for instance, around where I live, we have caves, okay? And some of these caves are full of bats. Now, if you start going, these caves then are open to the public, and then, people start going inside. The bats don't know what to do. But nonetheless, the human-bat interface comes closer. So everything you touch, everything you're surrounded with has got bat saliva, bat excrement. Okay? So at that time, you can have a spillover.
That means
the viral population
from one species to another.
Okay.
Now, this can be traced to almost any illness.
Any zoonosis.
every zoonosis. And this word zoonosis simply means that it comes to us from another
animal.
Yeah. So, but it doesn't make sense to avoid animals altogether.
Not at all.
No, that's not what we are saying at all.
Not at all. Even a bat could be your friend in the time of COVID. It depends on how you. Yeah, it depends on how your body responds to it.
Okay.
Okay. Let me give you one example. Perhaps a lot of you have heard of this wonderful bat woman of China. She's called a virologist. Yes, Dr. Shi. Now, one of the things that Dr. Shi found, which we mentioned in our book, one of the marvelous things is, at the time of the SARS 2003 outbreak, at that time, she's been investigating a cave full of bats for 15 years, okay? And it's a tremendously risky job. She goes there, examines the bats, under what conditions and with what courage, I cannot even imagine. To me, she's the hero past all heroes. So this lady found out that in the villages which surround this cave, during the SARS outbreak, nobody got SARS.
Yes.
Wow.
I'd like the audience to think about that fact. So then this attitude which we have, or we have had in the past, I hope we don't have it, of shoot on sight orders to any animal that holds a disease, Okay, so that one, the pig has got a disease, murder him. Say, massive slaughter of pigs, massive slaughter of chickens, massive slaughter of cows, massive slaughter of giraffes, and then perhaps massive slaughter of human beings, which was actually the origin of so many of genocides, of the caste system, of so many things, of excluding people.
Actually, the first reaction to a large number of people falling ill to a particular disease, which every epidemiologist has been warning about, but we have not heeded the call. We have, said, oh, these people are Cassandras. They are doing this, and they are always warning us. We don't listen to them, and then suddenly we are surrounded by them, and our first response is of decerebrate rigidity and of having our head chopped off. So we respond in a state of spinal shock, And
what we do immediately, see, the knee-jerk response to any fear is always violence.
Violence.
So the more violent a society is, the more ignorant and the more, just plain stupid it is. So whenever you feel violence around you, the answer to violence is always information.
That is how the body responds to violence. Our hormonal levels, adrenaline, it primes us to save ourselves. So we are in that flight or fight mode, which is the evolutionary mechanism for
primitive evolutionary mechanism. But we think we are Homo sapiens. We think, therefore we are, and therefore we can overcome that primitive response and think our way out of a situation. And we are not thinking our way out of COVID-19.
Okay. There's another question from Shweta Bhagat here. She says, why do you think while we followed the lockdown and even then it still got spread and changed our life?
Well, Shweta, that's the billion-dollar question, really. And I would like to say that we patterned the world strategy on a strategy which has been going on unchanged since 1348, when it began in response to the Black Death in Italy. The strategy has never changed till now, and it has never worked till now. So why should it work now?
It didn't work then. It hasn't really worked now.
So unless we change the strategy, unless we begin to understand that we are beating our heads against a wall and think out of the box.
What can we change? What can we can change things in ourselves. That's why the subtitle to this book that we have given is The Coronavirus and Us. if we take care of ourselves, we yeah.
No. Please go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Ajay, you have something.
Well, there's a question from Devamitra here.
That is
Says,
what distracted me.
yeah, do you think immunity-enhancing foods really will help with COVID-19? Devamitra, read the book, because that answer is there. But I'll let the two of you answer this as well.
You just answered.
Well, thank you, Ajay, for that starter to my answer. Devamitra, there are two words in your question which are extremely vexed. The first is immunity. Immunity is a catch-all phrase as soon as, like genetics, like when you say, oh, it's immunity, immediately you feel protected, you're immune. Yes, the dictionary definition of the word, you're perfectly correct. But in terms of the body, immunity is a bit complicated business. And our book will tell you a little about it. And it will also explain to you how you can't just have a one-size-fits-all idea of immunity. And as for enhancing it through food, I don't think any food enhances immunity. Food enhances immunity, all food. But not immunity enhancing foods don't exist. This gives you an immunity boost is total rubbish. I'm sorry, but we are in the business of treating illnesses nutritionally. So we do know what we're talking about here. And one of the constant battles we fight is against the media and the market forces which advertise immunity enhancement foods.
Actually, we can look at disease as a quarrel within our body. Any external element can start it off. It can start off a quarrel. It can incite the disturbance, as they say in Ajay's parlance of journalists, right? But the quarrel takes place inside the body, inside its own family members, and these have been, they reveal themselves in different ways. We as medical doctors, and medical science itself is focused on understanding these assets as they reveal themselves, and then imagining and anticipating what consequences they will lead to. And these consequences should not recur. That's what our hope is. Sadly, much of medicine is always hindsight. And hindsight can become recall that is timely and analytical. So we need to think our way out of this. We can think of it as an invasion of a body by this monster virus from outside. But that is the half of the story, which is the lesser half of the story. If we get infected, that is the unhappy ending to this story. And if we are immune, or if our immune system works, then we will have a happy ending. So like all great stories, this story of COVID-19 is also a love story. But like most love stories, it is a tragedy. And this particular tragedy for humanity has gone seriously wrong.
Right. Ishrat and Kalpana, now we definitely want to hear you read a little bit out of the book, because we're running short of time. So there's one question here from Professor Dash, and maybe you can read anything from the book that you'd like after answering this question. How difficult was this book to write, given the deluge of information and misinformation out there?
This is one of the questions that I was hoping no one would ask. Writing this book was a terrible challenge, because the science was extremely, happening. It is in a state of understanding which is still nascent. And to translate this into a language which is meant to, for the non-specialist, was difficult. That was the writer part of the difficulty. The science part of the difficulty was really keeping, wondering how much more would happen after the book went into for publication. But luckily, we found that most of the bases were covered by the time the book came out in print. Yes. So there it is.
Great. So are you ready to read for us?
I will read a paragraph if that's okay. first?
Yes,
Sure.
While you find, I have the book open here.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Ajay, from the questions you asked, like I'm going to read this particular segment. Okay. By
Okay.
now, and I read, by now surely the virus is everywhere. Time we put an end to our ostrich act of isolation. We should take heart from the discovery that SARS-CoV-2 isn't very viable on surfaces. So can we please ease up on drenching the planet with disinfection? We have more evidence of how the outcome of COVID-19 is decided not by the virus, but by us. A recent report estimated that 1 in 5 individuals worldwide is at increased risk of developing severe disease if infected because of an underlying condition. Because of an underlying condition. So the study calculates the risk at less than 5% in those younger than 20 years and more than 66% in those 70 years or older. It echoes the thought that fills this book. If you have an illness that puts you at risk, get medical attention now. Quite at variance with this advice is the most serious consequence of this pandemic, the neglect of other illnesses, especially in children who are missing out on immunizations and food. Diphtheria has resurfaced in Pakistan, in Nepal, and in Bangladesh. A newly mutated version of poliovirus has begun a slow trot across the globe. Cholera outbreaks have been reported in Bangladesh, in Yemen, in Cameroon, in Mozambique, in South Sudan. Measles, almost forgotten as a childhood killer, is re-emerging everywhere. This reappearance of childhood diseases reveals the shameful callousness of our species. Is it not a biological imperative to protect our children? Early in this pandemic, the all-absorbing question was not whether COVID-19 affected children or the unborn, it was whether children can spread the disease. Yes, there was a rationality to this. Still, it was a chilling inversion of the biological impulse. Children are no longer considered safe from COVID-19. Not after childhood multisystem inflammatory syndrome, MIS-CS is called now, and it has been reported from every affected country. So life for us has certainly changed, but how have the past months changed the virus? Changes in the behavior of the virus through mutations, which usually confer an advantage to the virus. One such mutation of SARS-CoV-2 was identified. This mutation is not observed in other coronaviruses. Soon, new mutations will come to light. And in addition, there is evidence that the virus undergoes recombination with local strains. And this can again raise the possibility of multiple spillovers. Now, Kalpana has identified some segments.
But I think you read what was relevant. So I am going to end this discussion with the words of a much better writer than Kalpesh Ratna. And I would like to read this little verse to you. Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind and therefore never sent to know for whom the bell tolls.
It tolls for thee. John Donne.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this wonderful discussion and for all these insights. And I recommend everybody read the book I have, and I'm going to get I've read it on Kindle. I'm going to get my paperback pretty soon so that I can it's easier to go through certain chapters, certain references, and you can get the book on Amazon, and both in the paperback as well as in the Kindle version.
Thank you, Ajay, for leading us up and down the garden path with such fun. And thank
viruses and illnesses.
My pleasure.
And thank you so much for everyone who's been listening in. Thank you for a very patient and
and hope we've answered some of your questions and concerns, and any other questions that you have. Hopefully, our book will answer those.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great.
Vijay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.